years ago. And so it's just a very proud moment for me that we're presenting even to the Balkans because, as I said, I was born here. But because of that domain expertise over all those years, I was able to win over the custodianship of the NICS system from the DHS and the program there, because the core goal was for me to improve NICS from where it was and modernize it, because that's what I've been doing with PTC year after year. And I would infuse that domain expertise into NICS. And I know why your NICS system is not operational, primarily because there was no stakeholder, meaning the tech stack is outdated, and there was really not someone driving the ship that allowed for NICS to improve and be modernized and be pushed as a system. And for me, really, what I liked about NICS is that when I saw it in California and worked with California and Cal US and Australia, I saw that it's actually very impactful on information sharing when an incident occurs. And especially with the current events, extreme weather events, I felt that it was the right system to take on as a responsibility and actually then modernize it for the current day and age. Make it, when NICS was designed, there were no cell phones. Like, there were no smartphones. So I knew that I had to update it to the new multi-cloud environments, make it cloud agnostic, make sure that actually it's more adaptable, and stabilize actually the underlying open source stack. So as we know, the current state of NICS is basically a very outdated system, and we basically partnered with DHS, got the custodianship of NICS from MIT, and now we're the gatekeeper of the code. And we did the analysis of NICS and said, okay, how do we actually improve this to bring it to the current day and age? So we looked at all the libraries, the front-end module systems, the front-end framework, the back-end modules, the documentations, all the testing, some sample data from California, Australia, to just understand how people are using it in real time, and based on that saying, okay, what is working and what's not working. We looked at the timeline of NICS in regards of like when it was initiated, what are all the frameworks it's using, how outdated they are, and how irrelevant they are right now, and why people are actually stuck with, we had a lot of feedback where people didn't really know how to install it, even after they hired expert after expert, and so a lot of nations actually kind of gave up before they even got started. So that kind of gave us a really big warning signal, because that shouldn't be the stage. We identified all the user personas of who's actually using NICS, because it's very important for me to understand, hey, like, what are the use cases for each step and the user flow, because that gives me understanding of like, am I achieving those goals with the system that I'm designing? Are those goals being achieved currently with the old system? And how can I improve those friction points with the new design? To UI, to better data visualization. And I think tomorrow in the demo with disaster, where Chris will show you some of the pieces and tools that we developed and designed, which is all about geospatial awareness. Because at the end of the day, what we're providing is better decision-making tools. We want to give confidence where you say, yes, let's send resources there. Yes, this is at this level of severity. All of those responses basically should be highly informed by our tool set. Nevertheless, for me, it's important that I deliver that information to the user profiles, and I'm happy to deliver it through Disasterware or NICS, because both will have an impact. And that's what excited me about being here in the Balkans, because I'm like, yeah, like now that we're basically almost like in control of both systems on a global level in regards to Disasterware, and with NICS for incidents, we're able to make sure that those things actually talk to each other and can deliver information as fast as possible to the right user profiles. So as I mentioned, we looked at multiple user profiles because we wanted to understand why people are using it, and we then talked to the user groups and trying to get feedback from like Australia and California, like what are the biggest issues they have on the ground at the command center. And then really for me it was, how do I help each nation, like Macedonia, with installing, the training, the customization, the feedback, the maintenance, so that you feel like you have a system that someone's responding to. So if something goes wrong, you have domain experts that can respond to the subject matter. So you're not kind of worried about what resources you have in the country to respond to the NICS issues, but you can actually depend on a team that has the custodianship of the project. And through that, similar to PDC, I get the feedback that allows me to understand what's the next feature that I need to implement. How can I help you to do your job better? Because I know, for me, this is really about purpose. I know that if I implement a better feature in NICS, it has a chance that it has an impact on the ground that's going to save a life. And to me, that's a definition of success, is that I can develop technology with purpose and spread it, and you're my ambassador. You on the ground that actually is able to utilize it, and the more I can actually support this community, the more I can actually increase my impact and the purpose that I'm driving with my team and all the organizations that we have behind us. And just some background on Kontur, we built the technical solutions for HOT. So all the mapping that happens on a global level, over 200,000 mappers, just like in Istanbul, when they actually were trying to map the roads and the buildings and the damage, the tools that they use, Kontur developed for HOT for the last 5 years. OpenStreetMap, we are the analytical team behind OpenStreetMap. Anything to do with building footprints, satellite imagery and building footprints and building heights, AI models, that's also something that we've done. Why? Primarily so that we can have a rapid response and rapid analysis around actually what's occurring on the ground. But for me, it's now helping nations such as yours with the old NICS and making sure that the new NICS is future-proof. And that's just our mission, because I feel I'm responsible to make that happen. Because if we make sure it's future-proof, we're leading with technology in a new way and more informed way. And what I mean future-proof is implementing AI like ChatGPT experiences for disaster managers as much as citizens. And we have videos that I will share with the attendants here, so you can see that in the vision when I was pushing for the custodianship, my main goal with NICS was to gather as much granular data as possible, because then I can be hyper-local in my response. And think of a hyper-local ChatGPT kind of environment where I'm able to allow the citizen saying, hey, I live here, or based on their cell phone, I can identify the location, and I can give them, based on the scenario that I know is currently happening, the right evacuation zones, the right instructions, and the right flow of communication in their language to get out of a harm's way. And think about if they're a disabled person, knowing how that actually changes the response in real time. So we're not limited based on how many responders we have, but we can amplify through the new technology stacks that now have emerged, as everyone has seen, into disaster response management. So because of our experience with PDC and disaster aware, and my desire as basically Chris, I was having a meeting with Chris in November. We were preparing for a program review, and to the main sponsor of the PDC program, and I was doing the presentation on what I'm doing with NICS, because I just got the custody in September last year, and that's when Chris informed me that he has something going on in the Balkans. And I told Chris, I'm like, I was born there, right? And like Kosovo. I used to fly planes, charter planes from Germany to Skopje almost 2 times a week. That was my first business with Avia Impex. Like, there's a lot of history with this region. And I have team members here and in Poland, so I'm more Europe-centric in my talents than actually the United States. And he's like, well, I'd love for you to come, and this is why I'm here. Like, I flew out of Hawaii the same way Chris did. But what I mentioned is that because I've made sure our whole technology stacks on our side on Kontur is open source. Because I believe in decentralized contribution because this is a purpose strategy. It's not about who is the biggest one in the room, who has the biggest name. This is about how do we contribute to something that actually is much bigger than us. Especially in the moments when we see the impact of it. When I see my tools being used either through PDC or through HOT in Turkey, and I see how it saves lives, it has an impact in real time, that's priceless. And the team members that actually contribute to this, they have the same DNA. It's not team members that say like, how big is my salary? They're like, what is my impact? How am I contributing through code to make the biggest impact? And that is just a different DNA, and that's why also most of you are passionately in this room, because it's something you can be proud of. So what I mentioned earlier is what I'm pushing with NICS and why I'm integrating disasterware deeply into NICS is because, as Chris mentioned, disasterware app, I was part of the initial discussion and the ideation of that application. And for me, it's important to bring in all the user personas that you care about in regards to citizen, responder applications, how we actually create the data flows through NICS, through disasterware to those stakeholders, and how I either give you a central command system through disasterware or through NICS, because we integrate disasterware data so you can have access to multiple nations like Albania, Kosovo, and Montenegro, so that you can actually see all those data assets in a command center-like experience, and all that is funneled through a credible source such as PDC and disasterware into NICS or vice versa. How we make sure that NICS produces products that then are distributed out to all the partners of disasterware, so that we can actually create that inter-collaboration that then actually allows us to have bigger impact in storytelling abilities. Just as I mentioned earlier, we have our main thing is open source first, just like NICS. So we have been contributing all our 15-year developments under Kontur basically into NICS. That means everything became open source, primarily because we want to make sure that we build the community based on engagement. We're not limited based on engineering talent, but we provide the community documentation, SDKs, easy implementation plans, so we can actually have developers, even in Macedonia, contributing to NICS. And it becomes actually a bigger cause in regards of the direction and development. But we also manage it with a team, so we are the gatekeepers to make sure that no one is implementing exploit or hackable elements, and we test all the code before actually we publish it out into the NICS core GitHub system. And then here's some of the open source stacks. All up to date. We're very H3 focused because our team is some of the core teams. We're also very much a big contributor to the open GIS system in regards of Kontur. We have a population data set that's also open source, that's being utilized on a global level, also is being utilized in Turkey. And I'm very focused on the UI and UX, user experience, because the technology can be fantastic, but if the user doesn't have an intuitive way to engage with it, and as you saw, disasterware is very modern looking, the training is much more simplistic, because for me it was, how can I implement a UI that actually is easy to engage? I don't want to give you a documentation book, like you don't get like a manual with your iPhone or your Android anymore. That's a thing of the past. We have to have the same kind of experience with disaster management, because it's about the event. It's not about, hey, how do I use this? Those times are over. So what I've been working on is, as you recognize, this is the old NICS, and I saw some of the feature sets were already in some of your presentations. And what we have done, we have modernized it. And that's why I mentioned we are providing the UI open source stack of the modern UI. And before we move in this direction, for me it was very timely to have these meetings, because my main thing is to unify the UI experience between disasterware and NICS, to make it as clean, as modern, so that there is almost a unified experience for disaster managers. I don't want them to learn two new UIs and UXs. I want to make sure that they have a feel like, oh, I know this, it's similar to this, and they can just engage into the event instead of having to figure out how to use it. And so We've implemented timelines, all the feature sets that you will see tomorrow in the disasterware demo. You'll see a similarity in regards to what we have done with the NICS modernization. What I'm most excited is that I heard that North Macedonia, from all my contacts around NICS, DHS, NATO, they said North Macedonia was the most forward-thinking and the most engaging in NICS in regards to contributing your data set, implementing the workflows. And so knowing that you already have spent all that time on figuring out the system allows me now to have a stake partner and a feedback partner that gives me the feedback so you can actually help me with the direction of the UI and the feature sets of the new modern NICS or NICS 2.0 and not an old version that you were having to deal with. And then same thing about making it agnostic in regards of mobile applications, drawings, all the tools that you need during an incident management. Bringing in all the layers through disasterware so that you know that those layers are credible, they have all the right metadata, so you can really focus on event-specific layers in real time. So if it's a flood, you have access to every flood layer that's relative to that geolocation. Why should you see a layer list that actually is not relevant to you? Simple things like that, geo-aware, geofencing, in the navigation, UI, UX experience building. And that's just some screens. Again, anything to do with deploying the current NICS system, we're very familiar with it. We have, as I mentioned, our collaborations with Cal US and Australia gave us all the best practices on that. So if you want to implement or deploy NICS so you can just make sure you start to use it, our team is more than happy to help. As I said, we have team members in Kosovo, we have team members in Poland. We'd love to bring them on site, understand the current status, see what makes sense, so we can actually get that feedback loop, understand what the stack is, how customized your NICS solution is, and go from there. And for me, it's really collect feedback. The more I can get, the more you are informing me to build you a better tool. And that's really what, like, my main agenda for this trip was like, how can I get actually to the people who are the right people so that they can talk to me and my team